welcome back to 355 Code. Today in this tutorial we're going to be teaching you how to make a basic joystick, and the requirements for this final app will be that as you see, we have the joystick here on the left, and when we press these joystick buttons we're going to want this little red ball to move in the direction that we pressed. In addition to that, we're also going to want to have this ball respond to the arrow keys, just as it would to this joystick. And we also want the ball to move continuously. So that means, if you give a single click on one of these buttons, then the ball will move one increment, but if I keep either my key pressed down or this button pressed down, then the ball will continue to move until I lift off of the button. And the last thing that we're going to want to do is make these buttons basically light up, change color, either when they're clicked or when their corresponding key on the keyboard is clicked. So let's take a look at what we have here for the setup. So what I did is I basically just kind of drew out the joystick itself and the ball in HTML and CSS, just so that we really focus here on the JavaScript. This code will be in the description below, so you can just use my HTML and Java and CSS, or you can try and make it by yourself. Just to give you a basic overview, each of these is a div, and we just spread them out on a grid. You can look up how to create a triangle using a div. It's as you can see here, it's just using different borders, etc. And I arranged them in different directions. But as I said, that's not the focus of our tutorial. So let's jump right into the JavaScript. So first thing we're going to want to do is just kind of register a click on any one of these buttons. So for that, we're going to need to kind of tap into these elements on the DOM. So let's just say that arrows will be equal to document dot query selector all, and we are going to tap into this class of arrow. And basically what this should do for us is allow us to apply certain functionality to all of the arrows, instead of kind of breaking it down into each individual arrow. And then we can just test the different cases based on the IDs of the arrows that we set up here. So another thing that we're going to want to tap into here obviously is going to be the ball. So let's select the ball as well while we're at it, and that will be document dot. Here we could just select element by ID. Get element by ID. And as you can see here, the ID for the ball is just ball, keeping things simple. And excellent. So let's start by setting up our first event listener. And this event listener will basically tell us when a certain action is being taken on one of these buttons. So we can just say that arrows dot for each. Okay, because remember, this arrows is basically returning an array of all of these, anything that has an arrow class basically in our HTML, which you can see is all the arrows. I'll even demonstrate this for you, just so that you see what's going on behind the scenes here. So let's just console.log arrows. And we're going to run our code, and here you can see that basically we have an array with 4 objects. And each of these objects is one of these arrow elements. So since it's an array, we can kind of loop through them using for each. So for each arrow, what we want to do is add our event listener. So let's arrow dot add event listener, and let's just use click for now, and then here we'll have a function that is handle click. Okay, and now we basically need to write our function. So let's write a function handle click, and you can see here that I'm using ES6 to write my functions out. So this would basically be equal to the same thing as just writing function handle click. Okay, so these two things are corresponding. And basically what we want to do is we want to tap into the event, because we want to know basically which arrow is being clicked. And then we can just tap into, let's say, event.target. So that's the element that the event is being executed on. And let's just say get attribute ID. Okay, so basically this is going to tell us, okay, what is the attribute of this, sorry, what is the value of the ID attribute of this arrow, or this, sorry, the arrow that is the target of this click event. And let's just store this in a variable. So let's say, let's call this direction. Okay, because you can see here that each of these IDs is basically an arrow in a direction. And let's console.log direction. So as you can see, I like to kind of test the code as we go, just to see that we're in the right direction and find bugs early. So if I click here, you can see arrow down, arrow left, arrow right, arrow up. So great, we're in the right direction. And now basically what we want to do is we want to make this ball move. And the way we're going to do this is using a switch, which basically will do something slightly different depending on what the value of direction is. So to set up a switch, you just use switch, and this switch is going to be based on direction. And basically the way switch works is that we give it different cases. So let's say for the case of arrow up, do a certain thing, okay? And that certain thing is what we write here in this line of code. So let's say if it's arrow up, let's just say console.log up. And then we can add, you know, another case for arrow down, and what's console.log down. Okay, so, and I'm gonna, okay, I already erased that console, so we're good. Let's save while we're at it and run our code. So if I click up, then you see it's at up and down. So we already see that there's something wrong here with our code, and that's because we didn't include a break here. And the break basically tells it that after, you know, if this case was applied, so if it was arrow up, then we run this code, and then break, exit the switch. Don't continue down. And if you don't include this break, it'll just keep on running the code until, you know, until it exits. So let's try that one more time. So here now I click up, it's logging up. I click right, nothing is happening because we didn't set up a case for right yet. And I click down, and we're getting down. So let's just set up cases also for right and left. So here we have arrow right, arrow left, and you can see here that the IDs, I named them with a capital A here, even though typically when you're doing camel casing, you'd start with a lowercase, and you'll see later on why I chose to do that. It could be that when I was originally writing this code the first time around, so I started off with different naming and I changed it to this for efficiency, but you'll see later on why that is. And let's just, let's just do some formatting here. And here we're going to want to console.log right, and here left. And let's just check that we have our switch set up correctly. Up, left, down, right. Excellent. Okay, so now let's kind of think what we want to do in each case. So in order to move this ball, what we need to do is basically just change its top and left values. Because I already set this ball up in the CSS to be position relative. And for this to work, it would have to be either absolute or relative. I chose to use relative here. In other cases, absolute might be a better solution. So basically what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to tap into the top value of this ball. So our ball we already have selected, and that's just .style.top. And let's just say, just for testing sake, let's say is equal to 100 pixels. Okay, and let's try running our code, and I'll click arrow up, and you can see that basically our ball moved 100 pixels down relative to where it was. Obviously this is not the right direction, this is not what we want at all, but just to show you what happens when we change the value of this top. So what are we actually going to want to do when we are changing this top value? We are going to want to do something relative here, and we're going to want to do it relative to the original top value of this ball. So let's say ball.style.top, let's say plus 10 and then plus pixel. Okay, sorry, plus pixel, because this needs to be a string. And let's just see what this does for us. So let's run the code. I click the up arrow, and you can see that it moved once, but not at all after that. Okay, so no. Okay, and let's already put this as minus, because moving up we're going to want to have minus. So let's test that now. Okay, it moves up 1. So we're going in the right direction, and it basically the correct increments, but it only executes once. So let's try and figure out why that is. Let's console the value of ball.style.top. And let's try that. So console.log. Okay, run the code. Okay, so it wasn't equal to anything. Our top value wasn't equal to anything. And then I run the code again. And then I click the up arrow again, and we see it's equal to minus 10 pixels. So our issue here is that minus 10 pixels, you could see, also because it's black, it's a string. And then I tried to subtract a number from it, and that doesn't really work so well for us. So what we need to do is basically just find the number value that's hidden within this string. And in order to do that, we're going to use a method called parseInt. And that basically just parses the integer out of a string. It has a lot of different options that it could take, but we just need the most simple basic use of it. And now let's test out our code again. And we can see that now nothing is happening at all. And the reason for that is that, as we can see here, we have just an empty string in the beginning, and we're trying to parse an integer from that, and that's just not working for us. So what we want to basically do is to give this ball a default top and left position of 0. And we're just going to do that at the top of our code. And we'll do that right over here. So let's say ball.style.top equals 0. And we're going to do the same for the left. Okay, and now let's try running our code one more time. And now you can see that every time that I click the top button, it moves 10 pixels up. Okay, so amazing. We are definitely in the right direction. So let's kind of set this up for all of the other directions as well. So let's, instead of consoling here, we're just going to want to add 10 instead of subtracting 10, so that was easy. And for right and left, we're going to want to tap into the left attribute instead of the top attribute. And so for moving right, we're going to want to add 10. And for moving left, we are going to want to subtract 10, and this is again on the left property. And let's just style our code. Excellent. So let's run again. Up, excellent. Right moves. Down moves. Left moves. Excellent. So that's really great. We're making great progress. And now let's try and really do this for our arrow keys as well. So that means that for each arrow, we're going to want to add, that means in our document, sorry, we're going to want to listen for when we're pressing down on a key. So let's just, over here, let's add an event listener to our doc. Add event listener, sorry. And this is going to be for key press. And let's make a function handle key press. Sorry. Okay, and over here, let's write out that function. Sorry, equals to a function. What have I done here? And okay, what do we want to do here? Basically, we want to find out which of the arrow keys was pressed. So, or if some other key was pressed. So basically, we're going to say event, and then let's console.log event.key. Okay, and key basically taps into which key was pressed. So if we run our code and I press the up arrow key, okay, nothing is happening. So let's try and figure out where our code is going wrong. Key press, handle key press. Let's try and figure out what is the problem here. Okay, so let's try using the key, because key press is kind of an older event listener that's depreciated in this browser actually. So let's try key down. Okay, and I'll just change this to key down and key down as well, just for consistency's sake. And let's try running the code one more time. And now you can see that when I press on each key, it basically logs the key that was pressed. And now you'll notice that the strings that are returning are actually similar to the IDs that I gave to the arrows. And this is going to really help simplify our code later on, as you'll see soon, because we won't need to have, we'll be able to basically combine the functions that we're using for the keys and the buttons because of the similarity in the wording. And then basically what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to move the ball based on whichever key we pressed. So let's just try, so basically if I was to take this switch function, this entire switch function, and put it here within our key down, inside our handle key down, and I would just say, let's say, const direction is equal to event.key. Okay, and now save, run the code. So you'll see that whenever I press a key, I'm actually moving the ball now. So it works also for the joystick on the display, and also using the keyboard. Okay, so basically we have completed number 1. Our code is not very efficient, and we've completed number 1 and number 2, but let's try and make our code a little more efficient. And basically, I don't want to have this switch function twice. I really only want to have it once. So let's try and unify our functions here. So instead of calling this handle click, I'm going to call this move ball, okay, because that's what this function really does. And I'm going to make another function, and let's call this, handle click, okay? And this handle click is going to be true for, true for either the joystick or the keypad. And basically here, I'm going to want to run this handle click function as well. Okay, so this handle click will really handle all of our movement. Okay, responding to all of our event listeners. And let's take this switch function out. Okay, and basically what we're going to want to do is for this move ball, instead of taking an event, it's going to take a direction. Okay, and this direction is going to be passed in, and we don't need this line anymore. And I'm going to copy this actually into our handle click function over here, right? So we're going to have inside of our handle click here, we are going to declare direction, and then we're just going to call move ball. Okay, so you can already see we have a problem because we're declaring this this variable twice. And basically what we want to do is we want to add an or here and say that this direction is going to be equal to event.target.getAttribute or the event key, depending on what fired off this event. Because if we are clicking on one of the keys on the keyboard, then this will come out to null, so it'll default to this event.key. And if we are clicking on one of these buttons, then we will have this and it'll move. So let's check out our new code here. So I'm clicking on the joystick and it's working. And I am clicking on the keyboard and it is moving as well. Okay, so that is awesome. So we really refactored our code, and it's looking a lot better now and a lot cleaner. And I'm just going to move this event listener down so that we have all our adding all our event listeners in one place, and we have our functions up here. Great. So let's move on to the next assignment, which is really to use continuous movement. And the way to do continuous movement is by really using set interval. Okay, so basically what we want to do is we want to kind of separate between our key down events and our key up events, and between click and when we're not clicking anymore. So here, instead of click, we're going to use mouse down. Okay, because we're also going to want to do something when the mouse comes up. Click basically registers an event when the mouse goes down and up again. and we're going to want to do something separate when the mouse goes down and when the mouse goes up. So you'll see that our code is still running now, the same as it was before, because our mouse is going down. But I don't have to lift the mouse back up or let go of the click in order for the ball to move. And basically what we want to do is in this handle click, we want to set an interval which will keep the ball moving. So let's say here, set interval. And for set interval, what we do is we basically give it here, we give it a time in milliseconds. So let's say every 100 milliseconds, which will be 1/10 of a second, we want to move ball in that direction. Okay, so now basically what it's going to do, hopefully, is that as soon as the mouse goes down, our ball starts moving consistently in a certain direction. Okay, and the same is true of the keyboard. Okay, if you're having trouble with the keyboard, you have to make sure that you're focused on this part of the screen if you're using a code editor like SoloLearn. So just give it a click anywhere here inside of the iframe, and then make sure to press your arrows. And you can see obviously that we have a problem here because the ball does not stop when we lift up the arrow keys. So in order to make the ball stop, let's add another event listener, okay, for each arrow, and this is going to basically be our mouse up event, okay, and this is going to be for mouse up, and this mouse up is going to run a different function. Let's call it stop move. Okay, basically this function is going to stop any movement of the ball, and we're going to need to add an event listener for key up, and it will also run this stop move function. So let's really pop into our stop move function and see what it does. So stop move. Okay, so let's think about this. Basically what we did here is we set an interval, and in this stop move we just want to stop that interval from executing. So in order to do that, we need to give this interval a name. So let's call this interval keep moving, okay, because that's basically what it does. And here what we want to do is we want to clear interval keep moving, okay, and hopefully that will stop the movement of our ball. So let's try this now. So I press down here, I lift up, and it stops moving. Okay. Okay, that's pretty cool. And now let's try with the arrow keys. So I press up and I lift, I press down, side, and uh-oh, our ball ran away. And up and down, and you can see that with the arrow keys, we are still having some issues. So the issue that I think that we're having here is that we're basically adding this set interval. We're adding more than one of these interval to the ball, and basically to stop us from doing that, we are going to want to clear this keep moving function or variable, whatever is going on here, and before we even clear this keep moving interval. So in order to do that, basically after we clear keep moving, which should stop our ball, we're going to want to say that keep moving is null. But this is going to throw us an error, I can already tell you, because or at least not work for us. And that is because this keep moving is declared inside of this handle click function, so it's not really a global variable. So what we want to do here is just declare keep moving so that we can access it. In here as well. And now let's try. Okay, so this is working. The arrows are okay. We're still having problems with the arrows. So let's try and figure out what might be causing that. Okay, so basically, let's try and console within handle click. Let's try and console console.log keep moving. Okay, and now I'm going to press down with one of the keys, and you can see that each time this keep moving, one second, let me erase the console that we have here, just so that we don't get confused. And I'll run that again, and I'm going to click the arrow keys, and you can see that each of these set intervals has a ascending number. And that's because as I keep the key pressed, it's executing this this handle click again and again and again and again. So it's basically setting multiple intervals. And in order to stop it from doing that, we are going to tap into something that's called event.repeat, and that's one of the properties of an event. So basically we want to say, so let's just console.log event.repeat so you can see what it means. Event.repeat. And this basically tells us if this event is a repeat event or it's the first time that this event is being fired. So if I press the arrow key, you can see that the first time that I pressed down, it was false. And then it's true, 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 true. Okay? And then, if I press down again on another key, you can see it starts off at false, false, and if I keep it pressed, then true, 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 true. So what we want to do is we basically want to add a condition here that we are only going to set an interval if event.repeat if it's false, because that basically signifies the first time that we are firing off that event. And I'm going to just format the code, and let's play. And I'm going to click one of the arrow keys, and it stops. And click one of the arrow keys, and it stops. Clicks. Okay. And we can see that we're still having some issues here. Okay, and that mostly happens when we are pressing multiple keys together. So basically, I'm going to add another guard here, and I'm going to tell it that the only time that I want to set an interval is if keep moving is null. And if there's another interval going on, then don't add, don't create another interval. So let's see if that helps us at all. So let's add another condition in here. And okay, so if keep moving is null, then this will also return true. And let's try again with our arrow keys. And now you can see that basically I cannot press two arrow keys at the same time. I have to only press one. And that is because as soon as we set an interval for here under keep moving, then keep moving is not null. So it will not set another interval until this stop move happens, and then keep moving is set to null. Okay, so basically we have our everything moving here. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to tweak this a little bit to 5, 5, 5, just so because it's a little jumpy. And here I'm going to change this to 50. Okay, and now let's just check out our code again. Yeah, so this looks like a much more fluid movement that we'd expect maybe in a game or something. And these are things that you can obviously tweak based on the requirements of your game. So last thing that we need to do is to make sure that the joystick buttons light up on click and on key press. So in order to do that, we're going to need to tap into CSS a little bit. And basically, I'm going to make a new class that's called pressed. And when the key is pressed, basically we will just change the color. And we need to change the color of border bottom because of how these arrows are created. But I really want you to focus on the principle and the JavaScript and not so much on the CSS. So here instead of black, let's just choose kind of like a light bluish color, okay? Basically what we want to do is that, what did I do here? Okay. Basically, when we start to, when we're handling click, we basically just want to add this class of pressed. So I'm going to take away this console, and here we just want to say document dot get element by ID. And the ID that we're going to be using here is actually direction, okay? Because no matter if we are pressing on any of these buttons here on the joystick, or if we're clicking on our arrows on the keypad, the string of direction should be equal to the IDs of these arrows, and that has to do with why I chose this naming specifically, again to just save us time in the code and not need to add other lines of code that would help all this stuff line up. So we get an element by ID of direction, and then we just want to add pressed to its class list. And let's check it out. So as you can see, when I press on one of these buttons, it adds the class, and if I press on the keyboard, then it adds those classes as well. So it's working, both for the keyboard and for the joystick, but as you can see, as soon as I click pressed, it doesn't get removed. So basically what we're going to want to do is just copy this line of code over here, and on stop move, we're just going to want to, we are just going to want to remove instead of add. Okay, let's format our code, and let's run the code. Okay, direction is not defined, so that does not work very well here. So let's try and think of another way that we could do this. We could pass direction into stop move. Could we do that? That would be a little complicated because we're running it here. We're calling it here in the event listener. So it really only taps into the event. So we can kind of just do a generic removal of pressed from all of our arrows. And the way we would do that is just do arrow dot for each arrow and arrow dot class list dot remove pressed. So this basically means that anytime that our ball stops moving, all of the arrows will not be pressed anymore. Let's run our code and try that. Okay, arrow is not defined, right, because this should be arrows. And let's run our code again. And you can see here that now they only light up when they are being pressed. And the same goes for the keyboard. So I'd say we're 99% done. We definitely have fulfilled all of the requirements. I'm just going to add 2 more CSS touch-ups, and that is that I will be adding cursor pointer to the buttons here because we want people to know that they can be clicked. So usually that's indicated by a pointer cursor. And another thing that I want to do is I want these to actually light up when I'm even hovering over them, because that is also something that can signify to our user that these can be pressed. So in order to do that, we're just going to add a dot arrow hover in CSS, and we're just going to change the color here to a slightly lighter color. Obviously, we don't want it to be the same exact color as our press, but it could be, let's say, a slightly darker blue. Excellent. And let's try running our code. And you can see that when I hover over these buttons on the joystick, they change color. And then when I click them, it's still staying with the hover color, and that is because technically when I'm clicking them I am still hovering. So what we'll want to do is well, let's see, either we can add a pressed here, and this will have also a hover attribute, and that worked. Okay, so I added a hover attribute to this pressed value as well, so it still reads this line of CSS even when we are hovering over the arrows. There might have been other workarounds that I could have used for that, but that worked. So you can play around with that, and as I said, the focus is not CSS. I just wanted to touch it up a bit because, you know, once we're working hard and making something, we might as well make it user-friendly with all of the basic functionality that we would want. So to recap, we made a joystick and a ball that responds to both the joystick and our arrow keys. The ball has continuous movement as long as the keys are pressed, and the joystick buttons light up, both when they're being clicked and when the arrow keys are being clicked. And this is a really good thing to understand because it's going to be something fundamental for any kind of game or interactive web app that you'll be making that really has something that needs to be moved around based on the keypad or a joystick. And I'm sure that if you're making games using JavaScript, you will find implementation for this. So if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. In the comments below, please give us your feedback, share your code, comment with other tutorials that you'd like to see to help you make your games sooner. And I'll see you next time.